Hi there, it's Laura here from iHeart Planners, and today I'm going to share with you how I organize my spices and give you a few tips for how you can organize yours. If you're new here, be sure to take a second and hit the bell and click the subscribe button so you don't miss any of the new videos we have coming your way. So this is my spice drawer here. And you'll see it's a nice big drawer. I personally, whenever possible, and I know this is not always possible, put your spices in a drawer. I much prefer organizing in a drawer to a cabinet if I have the drawer space. So I'm lucky here that we have a lot of drawer space. This is actually an island from IKEA. So it has the drawers that pull all the way out and it's very tall. So you'll see how we have even these able to stand all the way up, which is extra nice. So the bulk of my regular everyday kind of baking, cooking spices are over here in these glass jars. You'll notice the back part of the glass jars are empty. I think it's important whenever possible to have room to grow. So if I got more spices, I have somewhere to put them. I don't have a situation where when I get one more spice, I have nowhere to put it and I just have to throw it somewhere random. Then you'll see once we get over here, we have a lot of other more miscellaneous spices, and these are mostly grilling spices. So we have a nice grill smoker, and my husband enjoys grilling meat and trying out all different types of spices. So that's what we have here for these. These are some more of his grilling spices, and I probably could decant these into those little jars, but he actually likes the way that they sprinkle out in here, and they'd be a little big and I don't want to waste any of these. So that's why I've got them there. And then we have these little things that we use in bulk. And again, I don't decant these because this would be way too much to fit in one jar. Then we have our tall jars, some cinnamon sticks and taco seasoning we use in bulk. And even when I make homemade taco seasoning, I save this and I put my own taco seasoning in here. So we've got those and a couple more grilling spices in here. And these are sprinkles that I typically put in these jars. I just haven't done it yet, is the only reason. I just got lazy and tossed them in here instead of putting them in the sprinkles jar. And there is actually a jar labeled sprinkles, so I should do that. And yet you can put creative things. Like I like including sprinkles and stuff like that with my spices because I always know where they are, even though it seems strange. I will also mention on this side of the drawer, we have two of these. These containers came from the Container Store so that this isn't just like rolling around or moving as we close the drawer, even though we do have a liner that helps things from floating around so much. So I have two of these, and plus it keeps the glass jars contained on their side. And in the very, very back of the drawer, I have one more organizing item, this thing that keeps these spices all nicely lined up. And again, this is one that I just haven't bothered to decant yet. Now, these spice jars here would probably fit in a more normal size, smaller drawer. So if you have that, you can still use a system like this. The actual jars I got from the Container Store, and Amazon has the exact same one. So either place, they're available. I'll link to those below. They hold quite a bit, and that's one thing I think you should consider if you're trying to get matching jars to put your spices in. You want to make sure it holds the amount of spices that you need, because if it's too small, you're going to end up like putting half your jar in there and then you still have to store the jar. And in my opinion, that doesn't really get you very far because now you have two things to store instead of one. So that's why I really liked the size of these jars. I also like, there's like no, sprinkle out or anything like that. You just dip your measuring spoon in, and that's how I usually use spices. So I'm pretty happy with that. They do have spice jars though that have like the sprinkle feature if you're interested in that. Now, one question I get a lot is like, is it worth the trouble to decant your spices? Like, isn't that extra work? Yes, it's a little bit of extra work. In my opinion, for me, it is worth it. because I get spices from all different places. Aldi is where I get the bulk of them, but there's several things Aldi doesn't have, so I'll go to Kroger or whatever other store. And then I end up with a bunch of mismatched spices like this, and I just think that doesn't look as nice and neat. And I know for myself personally, I will keep it up, even if it's extra work, if it looks nice and neat, versus if it looks not as nice, I'm gonna have a harder time keeping up with it. Secondly, I think it is harder to keep track of my spices without decanting them, because you'll see I have these labels right on the top of the spices, so I can easily see what the spice is. It would be pretty hard to do that with just using regular spice jars. As you can see, this is much, much smaller, and so it'd be harder to fit. And also, like, this one has writing on it already, so in a drawer, it'd be really hard to see what I have. So I think that's another advantage to taking the time to decant your spices. And the next question, how do you decant your spices? Well, all I do is open the spice and pour it in. And you'll see how quick and easy this really is. And like I said, I have space, so if I'm just in a big hurry, like I did with the sprinkles, I just toss them in. No big deal. So in most spices, especially with how wide the mouth of these particular jars are, it's very easy to just dump the spice in, and that's all there was to it. So I think it is worth that little tiny bit of extra time. And I like that I can easily see how much I have. And really, I feel like when I have a bunch of different types of spice jars, seeing how much I have is really hard, because these look roughly the same size, but this one is 2.5 ounces. This one, I'm not even sure if it has an ounce measurement. Oh, 2.37. So these aren't too far off, but it's really hard to tell. This one is 1 ounce. I mean, that is a lot. It looks roughly the same, but it's actually a lot less. So you can easily see what you have. Next, I get asked about the labels a lot. So I will share the font in the links down below. This is a free font that you could use on your cutting machine. Doesn't matter what cutting machine you have. Pretty much all of them will do vinyl labels like this. I have a Silhouette and a Cricut that I absolutely love. And I just cut these out of vinyl. I use transfer tape and apply them. If you're interested in a tutorial video on that, definitely let me know in the comments below. If we get enough requests, we'll make a little tutorial to show you how to do that. And I just love these because they're bold, they look nice. It's very, very affordable to make these once you have the machine, because the vinyl itself is very affordable and you're not using much. The one downside is there is a little bit of time required to make it, and maybe you don't have your cutting machine out all the time. And so you might have a period of time where you don't have a label like this. And when this happens, I highly, highly recommend that you have, this is freezer tape and a marker nearby. Instead of putting your spice in the jar, no label, sticking it in and thinking that you'll remember, you won't. I know from experience you're gonna forget and you're gonna be like, well, is that cinnamon? What is that? And so rather than trying to make it perfect and beautiful at the beginning, I highly recommend that you go ahead and label with whatever you have temporarily, and then every month or so, get out your cutting machine and add the labels. Alternatively, you could use a simple handheld labeler if you wanted to, or if you're happy with the handwritten labels, there's nothing wrong with just using that and going with that. I will also mention that these are in alphabetical order. If they're not, it's like impossible to look through, especially if I had these all full and find what I have. So I highly recommend putting them in alphabetical order. My 3-year-old loves to organize them for me, so occasionally they will get out of order, but we do try really hard to keep them in order. And one little tip for that is, like, if something is ground, I do the label where I say cloves, then ground, because I want to alphabetize by cloves, not by ground. And I like to actually print the label that way. I mean, that's a personal preference, but that's how I do the alphabetizing. And one other question that I think a lot of you have with something like this is, do the spices slide around? So when I close the drawer and it's got a soft close, do they slide around? And The answer is yes, they do. So it doesn't bother me too much, but they do, even though we have a little grippy thing at the bottom, they're just so smooth. There's no avoiding sliding around. What we have done to help that is, we have it full, so I just didn't leave extra space at the back. You could put some sort of organizing bin or something back there. And then we have the bins at the side. So how much they can slide is really limited, but yes, they really will slide. So I hope you've gotten some great ideas for organizing your spices, even if you don't do them the same way that I do. And go ahead and let me know in the comments below how you like to organize your spices. I'm really curious to hear that.